morning, everybody. This is Hani from the global team at Beacon Japan, and today I'm very happy to be with David Glowatzke, who is one of our most experienced global master practitioners of LIFO Method. David, could you please talk to me a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. Thank you, Hani. When I was about 19 years old, 20 years old, I was finishing my undergraduate degree, and that was in education. At the same time, the Vietnam conflict was still happening, so I volunteered to enter the Air Force. I was very fortunate to be assigned to Air University, which is the university for the Air Force, and assigned also to work in psychiatry. At the time, I was very unsure about working in psychiatry or working in psychology, but it grew upon me. And I was also very fortunate that the school near offered a master's degree, and the master's degree, half of the study was in psychology, half of the study was in counseling. In the school is taught the theory of Dr. Carl Rogers. And Dr. Rogers is best known for something we call unconditional positive regard.
That's an interesting name.
Yeah. And for some people, they're very curious because we don't hear of that very often. Mm-hmm. And what happens is oftentimes people understand it better when we say, for Dr. Rogers, he really believed that if counseling was to be successful, or if therapy was to be successful with a family or with a couple or with an individual, is the first thing that needed to happen was to build a strong, trusting relationship between you or I as the coach or the educator or the counselor with those people who were seeking help. So I became very schooled in Rogerian psychotherapy or Rogerian counseling, and it also fit very well for me and very naturally. After the Air Force, I returned home to my home state of Minnesota, and I was doing two things. I was doing some counseling, and I was also directing a training company. Mm-hmm. I had some friends who worked at Honeywell, which is a very successful international company. And my friend said, David, you should attend this seminar because it's a very powerful seminar. So I contacted Honeywell. They said, sure, come and join us. And it was interesting because there I was introduced to something that is LIFO. When I first saw LIFO, I thought, what does last in and first out have to do with anyone at Honeywell? They said, David, well, LIFO may be an accounting term for last in and first out, but in this case it stands for LIFO. I said, well, what is LIFO? And they helped me to understand it stood for Life Orientations and was developed by originally Dr. Stuart Atkins here in Southern California, and also by his business associate, Dr. Alan Ketcher. It opened the world for me because suddenly when I was introduced to, in LIFO or Life Orientations, what we call the 4 behavioral styles, then I understood why the work of Dr. Rogers fit for me. Because by LIFO theory or LIFO styles, Dr. Rogers' work about establishing a strong relationship between Hani and David, it was very much in LIFO what we refer to as supporting and giving, which is also my most preferred LIFO style during favorable conditions.
Now, we are going to explain more about that later. For those of you who are not familiar with the life orientations or LIFO method, many people, whenever they hear the term LIFO or LIFO, as David just mentioned now, they confuse it with last in, first out accounting term. So we are now talking about life orientations, the training program that is based on strength psychology that David is going to share with us more about it now. So David, how strength and focusing on strength helped many people to achieve what they want in life and help them to maximize their potentials and achieve their goals?
Sure. I think part of the uniqueness about LIFO was developed by Dr. Atkins and Dr. Ketcher was, as Hani said, is what we call strength-based. And strength-based is when we first meet LIFO, It's about not what is wrong with you. It's about what is right with you.
I personally don't want to know what is wrong with me.
No, and see, that's very interesting.
Exactly.
Because there were other theories or other models or other assessments that we use, and the bottom line is, come, let's talk about your results and let's talk about what's wrong with you. But I thank Dr. Atkins and I thank Dr. Ketcher that they understood if we talk about what is wrong with us or what we need to change about ourselves, is we tend to get defensive, we tend to get protective, and sometimes we shut down and we're not willing to learn. But what LIFO does is, as you said, is strength-based. So the first premise of LIFO is, let's talk about what we refer to as our preferences, and let's talk about what's right about us. And that's why even in LIFO, when we have strategies, the first strategy is about confirming our strengths.
That's interesting. So let's get back a little bit more to your beginnings with LIFO.
Sure.
What grabbed your interest in LIFO and made you want to learn more and more about this interesting training program, or let's say this interesting method?
Yeah. So LIFO was very freeing for me. It was very liberating for me. Because as I mentioned before, although I studied the theory and practice of Dr. Carl Rogers, sometimes I was very frustrated in a counseling or coaching situation because I thought that rather than to develop a strong relationship, sometimes what the family needed or what the individual needed was for me to be much more assertive and be confrontational. That was my first aha experience with LIFO, because I applied LIFO styles to counseling styles, or sometimes today in coaching styles around the world. And where it was freeing for me or liberating for me is I saw LIFO as giving me permission as a coach and as a counselor to be sometimes, when appropriate, more what we call controlling and taking, which means more assertive, more confrontational. So I thank this process called LIFO. I also thank Dr. Stuart Atkins and I thank Dr. Alan Ketcher for liberating me and freeing me. So I think that to some degree I became a better coach, a better counselor, and I think a better human being because of LIFO.
Well, that's a sure thing. Dealing with you for the past 3 years now, this is one of the things that were very obvious to me and to many people who knows David personally. So, mentioning about Dr. Stuart Atkins,
Yes.
we are now, as you mentioned, as David mentioned earlier, LIFO was born here in South California, and we are now very fortunate that we are currently in South California, in the place that was the birthplace of
Yes.
the great method, LIFO methods, life orientation method that many people all over the world enjoying and benefiting from currently. Tell me more about Dr. Stuart Atkins.
So I met LIFO, as I said, at this company called Honeywell in 1979, 1978, and it was in the next year when I decided this is so powerful that I need to become certified to use LIFO also. So although it was about an 8-hour car drive, as I drove from Minnesota down to Chicago, Illinois, and the person who facilitated my LIFO training was Dr. Stuart Atkins. And it was a wonderful experience, not only to become certified to use LIFO, but to study under Dr. Atkins, because he had so many powerful stories and personal stories to share, not only about himself and his own growth, but also about the development of this thing called LIFO. And then if we fast forward, Dr. Atkins and I continued to periodically correspond with each other, 1979 to the early 80s. And then in 1984, I received a call from Dr. Atkins. And he said, I need someone to facilitate a LIFO certification course in New York City. Oh, my first reaction was, this is a real honor. My second reaction was, I was anxious and scared because I don't think I had ever been to New York City before. And suddenly being asked to teach LIFO in New York City was a scary experience for me.
Tell me more about that experience.
Yeah, yeah. So I remember, so now I'm in New York City and I'm looking up at these tall skyscrapers and almost falling over because they're so high. And I need a good night's rest. I need a good night's rest before I start to teach. So the next morning I get up early, and it's probably about 6 o'clock in the morning. And back then, before cell phones, this is a nice hotel. And not only I had a telephone by the bed, there was also a telephone in the bathroom. And I'm showering, and the phone rings. And I pick up the phone and I say, "Hello, this is David." And on the other end it says, "This is Stuart." "Oh, it's Dr. Atkins." And he said, "I just want to make sure that you're comfortable and that you're prepared to teach LIFO training." I thought, how wonderful of Dr. Atkins to give me this call.
That's very kind of him.
Then I remembered, it is 6 o'clock in the morning in New York City. It is 3 o'clock in the morning in California, where
Wow.
Dr. Atkins is. And then suddenly I was thinking, yes, this is very nice of Dr. Atkins to call. I hope he's not up all night long worrying about my facilitating LIFO certification because it's 3 o'clock in the morning. But over time, he has certainly, I refer to him as Dr. Atkins out of respect, and being one of, along with Dr. Katcher, developing LIFO. But now I also refer to him very lovingly as Stuart. Because over
As
the
a friend.
as a very close friend, because in the last 30 years, I think I'm honored not only to have been mentored by him, but to also have his friendship.
Thank you, David, for explaining more about this experience. I'm curious, hearing that LIFO method is somehow offering something similar to what is worldwide known as MBTI or this DISC surveys or analysis.
Sure.
How LIFO is different than maybe MBTI or DISC or Strength Finder or other training programs that might be offering the same thing?
I appreciate the question, Hanny, and whether I'm in Mumbai or I'm in Ho Chi Minh City or I'm here in Southern California, I get those questions oftentimes. So I think the easiest one, first of all, is the similarity and dissimilarity between LIFO and MBTI. I am thankful, as a psychologist and educator, I'm thankful for the work of Dr. Carl Jung. I'm also very thankful for this mother-daughter combination by the name of Myers and Briggs. Because Myers and Briggs helped, I find the work of Dr. Carl Jung to be very inspiring, also very complex. And the work of Myers and Briggs help us to more simply understand, here's the key difference between MBTI and LIFO. MBTI is focused on what we call personality types, or more simply, the who we are. LIFO, on the other hand, and Dr. Atkins and Dr. Katcher did this very purposely, is focused on what we call behavioral styles, or what we do. So think in terms of Myers-Briggs type indicator as personality types and who we are. LIFO, on the other hand, is behavioral preferences and what we do. I think it can be a very frustrating experience to try to change the who we are. I can praise my mother and my father, I can blame my mother and my father, but it's very difficult to change the who we are.
Exactly.
On the other hand, I'm not saying it's easy to change our behavior, but it's more realistic or more manageable. And that's also why when we take, for those of us that have taken MBTI, our profile or our results will be a combination of 4 letters. For example, in MBTI, I am ISFJ. In LIFO, on the other hand, we get 2 sets of results. And this is because it's behavioral focused. How do I prefer to do things when things are going well? We call that favorable conditions. And the other one is, how do I prefer to do things when things are not going well? We call that unfavorable conditions.
Interesting. That's exactly what I was thinking of when I first encountered those type of analysis or tools like MBTI or DISC, because I could be a totally different person when I'm under stress or when I'm under pressure, when I have a due report that I have to submit tomorrow and I haven't done anything
Yeah.
about. Or I can be a totally different person when I'm relieved, relaxed, when I'm having good time with my family,
Sure.
or something like that.
Henny, that you also bring up a good point, because again, MBTI is about who we are. LIFO is what we choose to do, and also when we take a LIFO survey, when we're invited to take a LIFO survey, we want to establish something that we refer to as context. Is before we answer the 18 situations in the LIFO survey, we want you to think of yourself, most generally is Henny, think of yourself professionally as part of the Beacon Global team. Or we could say, Henny, think of yourself as a partner in life, or as a parent, And what we find is some people, because they find that a certain style may work really well for them, prefer the same styles both during our personal life and our professional life. We also find some people that their styles change. That maybe how they define their role and the responsibilities professionally is very different than how they define their roles and responsibilities as a parent, or as a spouse, or as a partner.
Thank you very much, David. So I'm also curious to know what are the differences between DISC, or what is known as DISC analysis, and our LIFO method.
Sure. So I started by differentiating MBTI from LIFO because I think that's more simple to do. Is DISC and LIFO. Is if we look at the original copyright date of the LIFO survey, it is in 1967, 1968. On the other hand, what we could refer to as four-style systems, is if you look at the copyright date of the surveys, most of those are in the 1970s, that's DISC, on through Gallup and StrengthFinder, which might be the 1990s. I think the work of both Dr. Ketcher and Dr. Atkins, they were real pioneers. That they were the first people who, this is a four-style system, and it's all strength-based. The primary difference between DISC and LIFO, the DISC survey is actually, in my mind, quicker to take. Because what you're doing is you're given 4 descriptors, and you're asked to describe or to choose which one is most like you, which one is least like you. The LIFO survey, on the other hand, takes a little bit longer to take, because we give you we give you a situation, and then we give you 4 choices. And rather than simply to choose which one is most like you, least like you, although it's difficult, we want you to rank out all 4. One of the differences that it does is it helps us determine what we refer to in LIFO as what is your backup style. That of these 4 orientations, you may have a primary style, and depending on what the backup style is how you use that style can be rather different. So in that aspect although the LIFO survey is a little bit longer to take, the results are much more meaningful. So then within the survey, although it's very quick to take, we subdivide the questions into what we call intention, behavior, and impact. We ask Hanny questions about what do you intend to do as a team member at Beacon. We also ask questions about what do you actually do, and a third grouping of questions that what is your perception of how you impact other people?
That's very interesting, and it answers one of my long time questions. It's a question that has been with me for a very long time, which actually sometimes I'm interacting with people, and then we have a misunderstanding or a conflict. Sometimes it might go to a conflict level sometimes, and then I realize that the main cause of that is because my actual intention was totally different unconsciously.
Yes.
About it was different than my behavior, the
Yes.
actual behavior, which eventually had a different impact that I intended to have on the other person, on the person that I'm interacting
Yes.
with. So if I realize this personally and I work hard into aligning my intention with my behavior and eventually with my impact, this will help me a lot in my interpersonal relationships with other people. This brings a very interesting question which can help me in that is, does LIFO have something that helps me align my personal, my intention with my behavior and with my impact on others?
Sure. So what I was talking about, we measure within the survey is what do you intend to do, what do you actually do, and what is your perception of how you impact other people, is then as a LIFO practitioner, what we look for is within a style, within any one of the 4 behavioral styles, going back again to the work of Dr. Carl Rogers, is are you being congruent, which we mean, are you being consistent or not? So some people are being consistent. It's interesting when we study Dr. Rogers, is rather than initially referring it to as being congruent, that's kind of a fancy word, is Dr. Rogers, when you read about him, he would say, are you being real? Are you being authentic? But then sort of that word of congruence caught on. So what we look for is, if you are being congruent, you see yourself as being congruent or consistent, or other people see you that way, I refer to it as there's a clarity, C-L-A-R-I-T-Y. There's a clarity within our communications. And when we're not congruent, what we don't want to do is to say somehow your LIFO results are lesser, because that's not true. If there is a inconsistency or an incongruency within a style, then we'll ask certain questions. For example, if your intentions are not congruent or do not align with your behavior, first of all, Henny, do you recognize this in yourself? That for whatever the reason is, you may act in a different way than you intend to do. Oftentimes people will say, yes, I recognize that in myself. Then we go, as LIFO practitioners, we'll go to a whole nother series of questions. Why is this happening? Sometimes it's how you define your job. I think my job demands that I'm more of this style or more of that style. Another one may be the culture in which you're working. The culture in which I work is different. Or the third options could be, what is the LIFO profile of your boss?
That's interesting.
Yeah, that maybe your boss, for example, wants you to go slower and to gather more information and to analyze the information. The LIFO style we probably refer to as being conserving holding. So your boss may be demanding that of you. And ultimately, I think what we're also looking for is, are you comfortable? Are you, if your intention doesn't match your behavior, are you comfortable in using another style? Some people would say yes, and some people say, no, maybe I'm not comfortable. And that's a whole nother issue then for conversation.
So for some people, they realize that they have been behaving for a long time in a certain way that they might be unconscious of. So LIFO helps them to become more aware of that unconscious behavior that they are leading. And the second most important point actually is that they realize whether or not they were comfortable or not, because I might not be even aware that I'm comfortable or not.
Sure. And I think you bring up the word awareness. And I think that's one of the goals or one of the outcomes we look for in the LIFO process. That we want you to become more aware of your styles of preference when things are going well, favorable, and when things are not going well. LIFO doesn't stop there, because again, unlike Myers-Briggs, which is about who we are, LIFO is about what we choose to do. So in LIFO is, hopefully one of the first things we do is raise the awareness level. I hope that the second thing we do is LIFO also has what we call 6 development strategies.
That actually brings me to my next question to you, which is, I was wondering, so after I'm aware of my actual behavior and my intention, my actual behavior and impact on others, what next? How can I, in different situations, behave flexibly in order to have a better relationship with the people around me?
Yeah. Although what I said we refer to 6 development strategies, the first one is really not development. The first one, becoming more aware, is what we call confirming your strengths. And then to answer your question is, so what, if anything, do I choose to do about all this? The second LIFO strategy is what we call capitalizing. That we would say is, Henny, you describe that you use this strength quite often when you're in favorable conditions. Maybe you don't do that during unfavorable conditions. For me, for example, I tend to be very considerate when things are going well. I also recognize the fact through LIFO, I become much less considerate when things are not going well. So we call that capitalizing. The other thing also is we could refer to that as extending. So is there a strength that you can use or a behavior that you can use more frequently to either enhance yourself or especially to enhance the relationship? And again, LIFO can get at that because LIFO is behaviorally based and it focuses on our behaviors.
Interesting. My next question to you, David, is, as you mentioned earlier, that LIFO is contextual. So my LIFO results could be different from one situation to another. And I actually, on a personal level, talking about myself, I found that true when I was taking LIFO with a professional context, thinking about how do I behave with my colleagues, with my managers, in my workplace. And when I took LIFO for the second time, thinking about a different context in my home, in my personal life, how do I behave with my family members, different family members.
And were your results more similar or dissimilar?
Dissimilar. My results were totally different between my workplace context and my home and personal context. So it was very interesting to me. So does LIFO have a deeper level where there are different kind of applications of the LIFO survey itself?
Oh, sure.
Depending on the situation and context?
Sure. If I can build off of your example, although when Dr. Atkins and Dr. Ketch originally wrote the LIFO surveys, there's a survey that we could take on ourselves. And equally important in LIFO is what we call an AP survey. AP stands for another person. And I say equally important because it's not only important to become aware of your own preferences, we need to get feedback from other people. 50 years later, now we have more than 20 LIFO surveys. And this comes back to how you said that LIFO is contextual. We still have the general LIFO survey, but we have a leadership survey, we have a selling style survey, we have a parent survey, we have a child survey. And if I may, recently I had a person who was very interested in taking the parenting survey. And she has a spouse, and she also has 2 young daughters. And she said, David, are you okay if I take the parenting survey because I want to know how do I go about parenting my 2 young girls? And I said, of course. Then she asked a very surprising question. She said, I'd like to take it twice. And I said, well, I can arrange that to happen, but why would you want to take the parenting style survey twice? She said, because my husband has to travel for his work, and he's gone about half the time. And she said, I think how I go about parenting the 2 girls when my husband is home is a very different style than when he's away. Because when he's away, sometimes I feel like I'm a single parent.
So even with for the same parent, with the same child, the same parent could behave differently in a different context in a different situation.
For this parent, and it happened to be a woman, the mother, for this it did. And here's where you talk about the depth of LIFO. Mm-hmm. Here's how then she found it applying to her. Her husband's style as a parent was what we call the controlling taking style. And she was much more, when he's home, is being supporting, giving, and adapting, dealing. When the husband was not at home, when the spouse was not at home, she said sometimes the girls need to be disciplined. So sometimes I need to be more controlling, taking. And that's what appeared then in the 2 sets of LIFO survey results. But then we got to the other question, the question about comfort. Are you comfortable in the styles? Mm-hmm. To which he responded, I'm very comfortable in applying the supporting giving style and the adapting dealing style as a parent. But she said, I'm not comfortable in doing the controlling taking style.
Interesting.
So that sort of, in that one example, it took LIFO to a much deeper level. And I think most importantly is not only did she become much more aware, but in talking with her several times, she grew to be much more comfortable in being more assertive, in being more decisive, in being more directing, which are all characteristics that we know to fall under this style that we call controlling and taking.
Interesting. Thank you, David, very much, because the more you talk, the more I become more interested in LIFO more and more. So for those of you parents who always think, why does my children doesn't listen to me whenever I try to ask them to do something, here comes the answer. Maybe first, you are not aware of their behavioral style, and second, you might not be aware of your personal behavioral style with them in different situations and in different contexts. So life orientations can help you become more aware and also understand what to do with them, when and exactly how. So David, what other applications do we have in LIFO?
The number of applications is probably infinite, but let's cover some of them. Is probably originally it's about communications, and it's about both intrapersonal communications and interpersonal communications. Now, for some people who need those words defined, is intrapersonal, INTRA, is how we communicate within ourselves. Interpersonal communications, INTER, is how we communicate with other people. So even there is we have different depths about LIFO. LIFO in team building or family building is very, very popular. LIFO in leadership. LIFO in leadership is very important. Another one around the world is what we call selling styles.
Wow.
Sometimes you have salespeople who go, oh, I meet this person and it's so easy to make the sale. But how do I handle this person that they're so hard to close a sale with? Well, oftentimes when we take a look at LIFO styles, that also can be very, very helpful. We also find is that in LIFO coaching, we talked earlier about this thing called intention, behavior, and impact. For LIFO practitioners who do LIFO coaching, one-on-one coaching, and we have several famous universities who do a lot of coaching curriculum. Another very popular use of LIFO orientations is in coaching. And not only in coaching can we help people to raise their awareness, and we can introduce the 6 development strategies, but also in LIFO coaching, especially one-on-one, it's very conducive to introduce what we talked before about intention, behavior, and impact. Because in LIFO coaching sessions, and oftentimes we might be in a coaching contract that may take months or maybe even a year with a person, is we can start with the basics of LIFO. And then after several sessions, we can get into the whole process about are your intentions consistent or not with your behavior and with your impact. So after all these years of LIFO, as an educator myself, and this is being rather selfish. As an educator myself, I have the choice with LIFO. We could keep it very simple. In a 2, 3, 4 hour session, people can understand and apply the LIFO concepts. On the other hand, in LIFO coaching, is suddenly we're going much more in depth, and for people to understand how they intend to act versus how they actually act versus the perception of other people can be a much deeper understanding. So as an educator, I very much appreciate the ability to either have LIFO be very simplistic, or, and I mean this the complimentary way, is LIFO also can be very sophisticated.
Interesting. Thank you very much, David. So now we've learned from David that LIFO can help us become better parents. LIFO also can help us become better leaders and help us to interact in a better way with our colleagues and with our subordinates, and also in the same time with our bosses as a leader. Every leader has a boss at the end of the day.
Yes.
Also LIFO also can help us become better coaches. And by the word coach, we have several usages of LIFO coaching, because everyone is a coach somehow or another. While we are interacting with our children, we are also coaching them, we are mentoring them. So not only LIFO coaching can help us with our clients, it can help us as well with our children, in addition to the LIFO parenting as well.
Yeah, and again, is when people start to use LIFO with coaching, I think of one very successful international company that I work with. Is they have what they call GEL, a Global Emerging Leaders Program, and the coaches are executives from the company, which I think is a great honor for the company. And what those coaches find is their styles of preference as an executive, as a senior leader within the organization, may not be the same as their coaching style as they're coaching these global emerging leaders. And they find that to be very helpful and very valuable. So I think ultimately we're coming back to another word that I think is very important in LIFO, and because LIFO is behaviorally based, is the word versatility. When we do the capitalizing strategy or the extending strategy, we're really encouraging people to become more versatile. What that doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that we want you to retake a LIFO survey and your results will change. We're not looking for that to happen. What we are looking to happen is offering people an invitation. Sometimes in your life, maybe many times in your life, what we call your most preferred style is going to be very successful for you. And sometimes maybe it isn't. That if your most preferred way of doing things, of being a parent or of leading or of selling doesn't work for you, then what we do in LIFO is encourage you to practice your versatility, which means maybe your backup style will be more successful. Or in some cases, maybe our least preferred style will become very successful. I was teaching at a major university in the United States, and this is a LIFO certification class where people are very familiar with LIFO and they're learning how to facilitate LIFO. They're becoming LIFO practitioners. And on the second day of certification, one of the people said, David, yesterday you didn't share your LIFO survey results. And I went, ooh, I forgot. She said, did you do that intentionally? I said, no, I didn't. She said, well, are you willing to share your results? I said, of course. She said, before you share your results, I would like to tell you what style you are. And I said, I'm open to that. She said, I think your most preferred LIFO style is adapting and dealing. And I said, why do you think it's adapting and dealing? She said, well, in the first day and a half that I've gotten to know you, you're very sociable, you're very tactful, you use quite a bit of humor, so I think you're adapting dealing. My response is I held up my LIFO name tent with my LIFO survey results. And I said, thank you for the compliment. And she said, why thank you for the compliment? I said, because my least preferred style during both favorable and unfavorable conditions is adapting and dealing.
But now you have become a versatile coach and educator that enabled you to adapt, to transfer from one behavioral style to another.
At least through the eyes of this one person.
Yes. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, David, for sharing about this great behavior versatility, because being versatile, I believe it's very necessary, especially during the world that we are living in currently, which is often referred to as a VUCA world. The V stands for volatile, the U stands for uncertain, and the C stands for complex, and the A stands for ambiguous. And that's actually because of the rapid technological advancements that we are facing day by day. Now after the 5G, after the AI, the AR, and so many technologies, software and hardwares out there that will change our world in the next 5 to 10 years. So now what you are teaching us, let us know that with LIFO, and when understanding more about ourselves and how to behave with others, it could help us do good in the next 5 to 10 years and at least save our place there with our businesses and with our relationships to others.
Yeah, I think that also brings about one more question, and I ask everyone this question. So in LIFO, because we're talking about behavioral styles and we talk about favorable and unfavorable conditions, I think the question also needs to be asked, where are you spending most of your life? Is most of your personal life in favorable or unfavorable conditions? Is most of your professional life in favorable or unfavorable conditions? And I think that also offers insight for a lot of people.
Thank you very much, David, for today. It has been a great pleasure being with you and sharing this interview with us. Thank you for your time. We know that you are very busy and you have a flight to catch, and you were very kind to have this interview with us. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Henny.
Thank you, David.